Hello, I'm Bruce Lorincz, and this show is called Bruce on the Loose. I talk to people in Medina County and the school system and the city. Today, we're very privileged to have a Warrior's Journey Home show. Peggy Hegbar is with us today. She's a volunteer and a facilitator of the various groups, and Reverend Dr.
Right.
John Schluep is with us as well, and good to have you with us, and very, very important show to get to the nitty-gritty of this very fine organization. John, how did you first get involved in Warrior's Journey Home?
Well, it was like the year 2001, and I was pastoring a church in Talmadge, Congregational Church, United Church of Christ. And one of my church members, who was a Vietnam veteran, had befriended a person who had been through the VA, first at Brecksville and then Wade Park, through the psychiatric department. And his psychiatrist informed him that your issues are between you and God, that they've done everything they can medically with the medical model of treatment. And he wasn't showing much improvement. So 35 years later, he came in, found me, and figured I'm a veteran myself, and with my religious background or spiritual background, he thought this was a pretty safe bet. So he came in to talk to me. We spent 2 hours, and at the age of 18, he was drafted. I think it was 1967, 68. Found himself barely 19 years old in the carnage of Vietnam. He served in the infantry. And he participated in some pretty awful things and carried that invisible wound, is what I came to call it. When he finished his story after about 2.5 hours, he and his wife, I said, "I'm sorry, I can't do anything for you. I can't offer you any kind of platitudes. I'm not going to chapter and verse you, but I will do this. I will walk through hell with you." And that companionship offer, which was true, don't promise something if you're not going to do it, made a difference in his life. There wasn't a diagnosis, there wasn't a treatment plan, it was just, I'm going to walk with you through this. And as time went on, he began to talk more and more about it, what he had experienced, and it seemed to bring some healing into his life. And then when he left my office after that first visit, I breathed a very brief prayer that said, "God, forgive us for what we've done. Show me what to do." That was the initiatory event that I began research into post-traumatic stress and how other cultures bring their braves or warriors home, or veterans home. And I thought there were some things we could learn. So I had been working in the area of spiritual development and just applied some of those principles to this, and that was the initiatory event of Warrior's Journey Home. Contacted a few veterans in my congregation, and we began meeting on a Sunday evening and talking and sharing and offering a ritual and ceremony, and people began to function better. Mostly men, better husbands, better fathers, better grandfathers. And then we opened it up to the civilians, because they had their story, and we refer to them as the people of strong heart. So essentially, and this is important for understanding Warrior's Journey Home protocol and our model, is the civilians have a responsibility to protect and guard the returning veteran and allow healing to take place. In African cultures, warrior cultures, a brave would have to spend at least 3 months with a shamanic healer before they would be permitted back into their village. And when they came into their village, the people understood their job was to protect that brave as he or she found healing. Later on, I discovered Jonathan Shea, who was out of the Boston VA, and he coined the term moral injury, which finally gave me language to talk about what what we were experiencing, and I thought, why aren't faith communities doing this work? And
John, you're just giving me the segue to the next question. Since you've dealt with these veterans and soldiers coming back for 35 or 40 years, and we've had the Gulf War since Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, has the need for us the civilians to concentrate on a reentry, has it diminished?
It's always been there. It's always been a need. And that's part of our mission, is education and information and empowerment. I had the privilege of speaking at Trinity United Church of Christ in Wadsworth, and that's where I first met Peggy. Mm-hmm. And thank God she decided, I want to do this work too, mm-hmm. do this work as well. So we have a local group in Wadsworth under the leadership and facilitated by Peggy, and so that, to answer your question, we have abdicated, in my opinion, we've abdicated our responsibility to the medical community, which they do a good job. They do a really good job, a fine job. However, there's a missing piece, and that's the piece of the civilian population accepting their responsibility and providing that healing environment. Military service changes you. War really changes you. If we're going to have peace, we're not going to have peace until we heal the invisible wounds of war. Those things will remain open and festering inside us, and it impacts every phase of our culture.
Peggy, you met John that Sunday morning, and was that the impetus for you to join him in his organization?
It was. The sermon that he gave that Sunday morning, which was the closest Sunday to Veterans Day in November of 2019, touched me so deeply. I'm a daughter of two World War II Navy individuals, and my first husband was a Vietnam vet who sustained a lot of emotional and soul wounds that were never dealt with. And that's why I felt I just had to get involved. I could see, and the statistics that John quoted that day, and which I feel are very much now out of date, we're losing more than 22 veterans every day to suicide because they don't know how to cope. They don't know what to do. As John said, the medical model is doing what it can, but it only can go so far, because what we're finding is we're teaching our sons and daughters to kill people. And when veterans came back from World War II, World War I, they had an ocean liner, and they had a week or 10 days or whatever to talk about it with other soldiers.
Ticker tape parades.
Yes.
In New York City and many other cities.
Exactly. When the Vietnam vets came home, the government had a contract with Delta Airlines, and in a matter of 24 hours, they were home. And it was kind of like our government said, thank you for your service, and go back to your normal life.
They kind of snuck home and didn't want to be recognized sometimes.
Well, and sometimes they were, and booed and spit at, and our Vietnam veterans suffered a lot by just the culture that was in the United States, the fragmentation. We were on two sides of that war issue, and it was really difficult.
What are some suggestions you can give to civilians and or people in the community that have not served or really didn't have anyone in the family that were veterans? What are some things that we could do?
Well, it's interesting because I have just recently been listening to, there's a global summit going on about resilience, and I've also participated in 2 global summits on collective trauma. War creates a collective trauma. So we have not only our individual trauma, if we serve, But you know, there's that phrase that says they also serve who only stand and wait. Those individuals who waited for sons or daughters or brothers or uncles, they also experienced a trauma. And I think while we want to encourage people to get involved with Warrior's Journey Home, one of the first things that we can do, even within our own family, is to begin to speak about those injuries. Begin to listen. You know, my dad was one of the few veterans that was both in Pearl Harbor and Normandy, both theaters, and survived. He never wanted to talk about it. Those individuals who have the deepest pain are the ones that are the most quiet. So what if we sat across a chair from someone and said, tell me what it was like for you, and to begin to say, not just thank you for your service, which, as John could tell you a story about a time that he said that to a gal that he felt had been in the military, and she said, you wouldn't say thank you if you knew what I had done. He said, well, what'd you do? And she said, I was at Guantanamo Bay. And all the things that happened there that were not even up to our standards of prisoners of war. So I think we have to begin to give a voice to the pain and the language. We say we don't understand war. Why don't countries get along together? Well, you know what? Why don't families get along? You know, I have a brother 8 years younger than myself. I'm just going to confess this. And I haven't been in touch with him in over a year. Why? So as I was thinking about this morning and having listened to a piece of this global summit this morning, I said to myself, I need to go home and call my brother and say, what was it like for you having 3 older sisters who were very close, and you being 10, 8, and 6 years younger, you didn't fit in? What was that like for you? Why are we not closer, and what can we do to heal that? I think it has to start at home, and we have to take responsibility, the ability to respond to the pains and the woundedness in our own families, in our own American culture. That's what people can do. Start at home. You don't have to necessarily be a part of Warrior's Journey Home to begin a healing process.
John, we hear the stories about the VA being overburdened and difficult to get things organized. Is that some of the concern that some of the veterans have, the bureaucracy and trying to get help from the VA?
There's that's a multifaceted issue. Part of that issue is the VA services are oftentimes in larger cities. A lot of veterans come from the rural communities, and transportation is an issue. A veteran sometimes doesn't feel like a veteran, or that they should take advantage of the services that the VA provides because they were not in a war zone. I never served in a war zone. I served during war, but not in the war zone. But I go to the VA now for hearing aids and for other medical things. But I find their services to be remarkable, very thorough. But another part of that resistance to the VA for veterans is, number one, they don't know the services that they are entitled to. The second thing is that they mistrust a lot of the institutions that they serve to protect. And when we talk about the moral injury, there's 2 different tacks. The first one is, I commit a moral injury when the noble cause that I signed up for to serve, when I get betrayed. The other, that's one of the tacks, is the betrayal by the institution, that this is not a noble cause. The second part is if I violate my own personal code of ethics and morals, which is the story that I told about the Vietnam veteran. He was brought up in a church. He was brought up with the Ten Commandments. He was brought up with thou shalt not kill. And then he was placed into a situation where he killed a lot of people that were not combatants. So what happens is the people don't want to hear that story. They don't want to hear it. They want the glory. They want the idea that this is a real good thing we're doing. It's not. War is awful. War is destructive. It just takes and never gives. So with the VA question, the services are there. I've only had a handful of veterans who have gone to the VA feel that they're not treated well. So I think some of that has to do with the size of the VA, the bureaucracy of the VA, the red tape of the VA, the benefits that you just have to stay on, which is a lot of what we do. I've had people come to Warrior's Journey Home and tell me they're never going to go to the VA because they don't trust the institution. But after sitting in a healing circle of trust, and they listen to other veterans, and they listen to the parents of veterans and the spouses of veterans, they will check themselves in to the VA. Just had a young man from who's part of Valor Court in Summit County. He grew up in southern Ohio, but he realized and recognized that he had a substance issue. He also had a 70% disability because of what he did in Afghanistan. He checked himself into the VA for treatment. But he wouldn't have done that had he not had a community to support him in that. Community is essential for veterans to find healing and to carry, and part of that community needs to help carry this wound and take responsibility for it. Watch how you vote. When we send our sons and daughters off to war, and as Tim O'Brien mentions this in his book, The Things They Carried, they come home talking dirty. We don't want to hear that. We want, Dr. Shelley Rambo at Boston University, she's in the School of Theology there. She wrote several books, but dealing with spirituality and trauma. And she pointed out that in Greek understanding, anybody that goes to war and returns is a tragic hero because war is tragedy. In our culture, in our Western culture, we want redemptive heroes. We want to know that what you did was redemptive for us, that you saved us. And that's woven into the fabric of a civil religion. You don't have to go to church to have that ingrained in you. When I begin to talk to vets about the tragedy of what they went through or what they did, because a lot of it is they're the perpetrators of violence, that gives them a framework to work from that is, that number one, it's healthy. Number two, it begins to get into the ceremony and ritual to bring healing into your life. You mentioned ticker tape parades with World War II veterans. A guy named, I think it's Tom Childers, who's a historian and a professor, I think at Pennsylvania University, wrote a book called Soldier from the War Returning. There's a myth in our culture that the people come back from war and everything's fine. It's not fine. Statistically, World War II veterans had high rates of unemployment, high rates of domestic violence, high rates of substance abuse, high rates of homelessness that wasn't matched until 1973 with Vietnam veterans. So if we're going to look at the cultural norm, we need to understand that. War changes us. It changes our culture. We carry that. However, the hope and and positive outcome is that we learn something from it, that we increase our wisdom, that we become more caring. And as Peggy said, that community in the family. So that's, you asked about the VA. That was a very simple question. I'm giving you a lot of information.
That's good background foundation.
They do stay away from the VA because I didn't think I was entitled to anything.
Right.
And talking with combat vets, they said, Schluep, you got to get to the VA to get what you earn.
I think there's a breakdown in communication.
It's
I think that's something that we need to work on and deal with because, again, we assume, just like Social Security and other federal benefits, they have it there, but we need to take advantage of it. You talk about tragedy. Would the change in Iraq and Afghanistan add to that tragedy that here I've got one tour done, and oh, by the way, we want you to sign up for a second and third, and I've heard as many as 4 or 5 tours in that same difficult situation.
Yeah, just think about what that does to your family. If you're deploying all the time, we didn't draft anyone for Iraq and Afghanistan. It's an all-volunteer army, so it's like, well, you did this yourself. Well, as Peggy said, she had a family member who was in the Pacific Theater and in the European theater. It boggles my mind, is how many deployments can a person take? And you're missing out on so much of the things. I had a conversation with a juvenile court judge the other day, and she was asking me, is it possible that if a parent is a veteran, that their adjustment back into the civilian community is impacting their children? And I said, well, you're talking about transgenerational issues. The answer to that is yes. And then she went on to say that they have no way to determine whether that parent is a veteran or not. And so we've started working together on Children's Protective Services and also with juvenile court to have an intake form where, did you serve in the military? Were you in the National Guard? Were you a reservist? What did you do? And just discern, are you taking benefits from the VA for this? And there are some benefits that the children are entitled to as well through veteran centers. So there's help out there. What we do is the soul repair work, the spiritual healing, and that's an important component that is oftentimes missed in a medical model of treatment.
Peggy, what about businesses, industries, churches, schools, individuals? How can they support Warrior's Journey Home?
Well, certainly monetarily, we need resources, which is one of the things that I'm working with John. We have a development committee that's putting together money for a foundation. So there's always that. But there's also, what I think we need in the community is the recognition of support, of the welcoming back. That's the part that community and businesses can do. And I think that we need to have, even here in Wadsworth, what can we do to be more supportive of our veterans that come home? Not just the parade on, there's Veterans Day, there's Memorial Day, those traditional things. One of the things that we have here now, because we have Warrior's Journey Home, is the first 11 days in November, we have a witness tree. We do that out front of Trinity United Church of Christ, which is 215 High Street here in Wadsworth. We hang 22 dog tags every day simply to raise awareness of the crisis that we're facing and losing our veterans. So to become involved in things like that and supportive of that. And before we close, I just want to make sure that we've talked about this circle. Our Healing Circle of Trust in Wadsworth is the second Thursday night of every month, 6:30. We meet in the lower level of Trinity United Church of Christ, 215 High Street. We have nothing to do, this is not a religious organization, simply using their space. But sometimes you have family members that want to come. One of the questions that you had sent to me was, are the vets less likely to respond? I think often. I mean, those of us who need help sometimes don't know how to ask for help.
So that would be the 14th of April, I think?
March, the 14th, of March.
Okay, we got
It's coming up.
April 1st is
Oh, it's
today.
today. Yeah,
So
14th.
14th. At what
Correct.
time again?
6:30.
John, if they come one time, that doesn't strap them for a year. They can just come and
once.
see what
Yeah.
it's
Right.
all about.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think, talking and listening to, like you say, listening to someone else might conjure up some of the same horrors that you've gone through, and I would think it would help the veterans to maybe come out of their shell, so to
Right.
speak.
A lot of times they're afraid of the trigger. Something's going to take me back. The exit from Afghanistan recently triggered Vietnam vets after the fall of Saigon in 1975. I got real busy. Also with our Afghan vets who were incensed because that warrior code of ethics is we don't leave people behind. We do not abandon our allies. That's in a warrior code and warrior ethos. And a warrior is not someone who's been to war. A warrior is an aspect of your character. Sitting Bull said, our warriors are not what you think warriors are. They do not, no one should have the right to take another person's life. Our warriors protect those who cannot protect themselves. This is what Sitting Bull understood warriors. And that's what we need. I think we need to integrate that, because then we have many warriors who are not serving in the military. Mother Teresa had a warrior's heart. Jesus of Nazareth had a warrior's heart. Hiawatha has a warrior's heart. You can have a warrior's heart and not wear a uniform. It's been instilled and ingrained in me. I'm gonna protect those who are vulnerable, children especially. And I know Peggy's got a warrior's heart. I've seen it, but I've heard it speak. So it's being in a safe environment where what we talk about in here stays in here. We're going to make sure you're safe. We're going to listen to you. And you mentioned the big wars, the ones that made the front page. There's Somalia, Kosovo,
Africa,
yeah,
Northern Africa,
I have
yes.
a lot of
Happening now, Rwanda.
I've had a lot of Black Hawk Down participants, vets from that movie. That was actually reality there in Somalia, and we maintain a connection, and that's important.
Peggy and John, thank you very much for your time. Warriors Journey Home, ladies and gentlemen, a wonderful organization. Again, we invite veterans to come to the circle on the 14th at
Yes.
Trinity Church. At what time again?
6:30.
6:30 p.m. And again, you will have an opportunity to listen, to share if you want to, and learn. Thanks for viewing, and we'll have other shows coming up.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.